I am joined today by David McRaney. He is the host of You Are Not So Smart, which is a delightful podcast and one that I have been jumping into and very much enjoying. And I'm thrilled to have you on, David.
I'm thrilled to be here, sir. Let's talk about stuff.
Let's talk. So let me tell people why I like you.
Okay, cool. Yes,
In,
yes,
in
please.
addition, in addition to you just being a cool, nice guy that I've enjoyed hanging out with, and the couple of times we've met, um, the longer I do political media, and this is very strange for a guy that hosts a show with the word political built into it. The longer I do political media, the more I find politics very boring and tedious, and the more I am really fascinated by how people arrived at a conclusion. So
hmm
I really am less interested in who's going to win the gubernatorial election than I am in why are conservatives so focused on the border, but progressives are focused on a tungsten tariff or whatever that thing is, right? I really
hmm
enjoy cognition, and I feel like You Are Not So Smart is just that. It's just that high distillate cognition.
Absolutely. I mean, like, I share this. I would desire to get away from the particulars most of the time. I mean, usually when I get frustrated, I want to float up above whichever metaphor you want to use. I either want to float up to a bird's eye view, or I want to get very reductionist and understand what's happening in neurons as
Right,
to why somebody would behave the way they're behaving, or choose the things they're choosing, or do what they're doing,
right.
or get mad about things that don't seem to be worthy of anger. And you were the more I got into those topics in the early days, the more I started to see, oh yes, I do every single thing that I'm mad about other people doing. And You Are Not So Smart became this opportunity to show everyone that everyone is ridiculous in a scientifically backed way. So you is me, it's everyone. And it's the concept sort of became this strange unity through humility approach that the deeper I got into it, the more stunning the findings became, until I started to delve into deeper topics like the insurrection and things like that. Like the second I saw the insurrection on TV, I was like, okay, I want to understand what was happening in these people's brains. And
Right.
went out and asked the experts who were the experts on that topic, made a show about it. And then for me, it made it so that I didn't have to be frothing at the mouth, upset over different aspects of it. I was like, oh,
Right.
this makes sense. I understand how this makes sense on 1,000-year timeline, 1,000,000-year timeline of human behavior. So I'm with you all the way.
Yeah, and well, that's I think one of the things that you have to keep in mind in politics is a lot of the time, people that are making decisions you disagree with are making rational decisions, or there's at least a one of the things I find that makes it easier for me to deal with people I disagree with. Like how here recently, I mentioned that I was friends with a high profile pundit, and one of my other friends was agog that I could be friends with this person and it was just how can you and we got into this argument and I went, this is the logic that the person is this is their train of thought. Let me explain their train of thought to you. You and I disagree with the variables in their train of thought. Their logic we don't have a problem with, and in fact their morality we don't have a problem with. What we have an issue with is we disagree with the basic uh, A versus B data that they're using. And
hmm
I'll say for people that listen to the show, I think the temperamental commonality, and I point this out, the Political Orphanage is not an ideological show, even though we all have our own ideologies and stuff. Like the kind of the temperamental bearing is there's a ton of people that have at some point gone, why are you yelling at me? Like there's just a lot of people that have friends and aren't sure why their friends keep getting mad at them because they
hmm
like, I'm friends with you. Why are you mad at me? And so
hmm
I think you've got that. So on that note, the shows that I most enjoy on your program that I've really got a kick out of have dealt with political identity, groupthink, tribalism, things like that. And that
Yeah.
is very much what I'm trying to dive to the bottom of. So first kickoff question to you. Are we polarized? And if so, what do you think is the driving force behind it?
Wow. Gonna start with the big one.
Hmm.
Yeah, sure, we're polarized, but that's like, I think one of the weirdest things about all of this is everything feels like it's new, right? Everything feels like, oh no, this is the worst it's ever been, blah, 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 blah. Or what happened to us? What's the poison in the water? What constitutes the lead in the pipes of our political discourse? And it doesn't take much research or interaction with experts on these topics to start to get a very long view of, like, we've always been this way.
Right.
The only thing that happens, technologically speaking, is it lowers the cost to exhibit behaviors that have been around for millennia. And one of the things that the modern technological and the sort of epistemological landscape, the information ecosystem we're in right now, what it offers more than anything is the ability to organize very quickly around anything and create a group around something very, very, very fast. We saw that just recently with like the slap at the Academy Awards. Like there were immediately groups forming around different perspectives on that issue, to the point that if it expressed a political value, and it did, many of the takes expressed a very particular political value, you could use that as an organizing principle for a group of people who might be able to exert political action at some point. Group action, right? Which is no different than what happened with the insurrection. So the it's not so much that we're more polarized than ever, although there in many regards we are, but that's something that wanes, that waxes and wanes and is in flux at all times. It's that we can organize around anything very quickly. That's something that's pretty new for us. And everyone's been invited to the conversation. That's another thing that's pretty new. There were information gatekeepers and conversational gatekeepers at work for a very long time, where if a book came out that that people have opinions about, there were like six people that could tell you how good that book was, and we all had to
Uh-huh.
just go, okay, well, that's what they think. The same
Yeah,
thing with
Walter
movies.
Cronkite said it's good. It so did the New York Times, and
Yeah,
but the National Review said it was bad. Those are all of the opinions
right.
available to us. Let's go back to the house.
Same thing with with movies, but also the same thing with world events and political discourse. Like there wasn't a there was a global conversation taking place, but not in a way that had any, we didn't have access to it or impact to it. So I don't look at things like Twitter and Facebook as being this horrible plague. I look at it as it's new, sure, but um it's the context that gives us juice when it comes to disagreeing, is that you can imagine, this is the way it's been described to me by Hugo Mercier, a cognitive neuroscientist. You imagine there's three people on a hill, each one is facing a different direction, and you hear a noise in the woods or the jungle or the savannah, wherever you're imagining this, and you want a worldview that you can all agree upon, that you can use to make plans and goals and work on things together. And because you're all facing a different direction, you're going to have some sort of trust that, okay, this person is seeing this person is seeing this person is seeing this, and we need to combine all three of these perspectives. That being said, this person has had these experiences in life. This person is good at this stuff and bad at this stuff. And I know that about them because I've established some sort of rapport with them. So I can disagree effectively. They can say things that I don't agree with, but it's also useful to have their perspective in that in
Right.
situation.
Yeah, Bert, listen. We should acknowledge you've been attacked by a mammoth several times, and so we feel like I'm just saying, Bert. It's possible you're a little. At the same time, though, Bert knows what a mammoth looks like.
There
So
you
if
go,
Bert says
right?
it's a red alert, maybe he's overdoing it. But we should listen to Bert. I've never
Right.
been attacked by a mammoth. I'm not that. I'm kind of foolhardy about it.
Exactly. And now you fast forward to say we're all around, we're friends who have differing political ideas and viewpoints and ideologies and values. We're having dinner together, and somebody says something outlandish. Like there's no real, there's not really a chance that that person is going to be ostracized and shamed to the point they're not invited to come back unless they do something bonkers. So even in that environment, we can have these heated discussions on things and sort of coalesce our worldviews. All of that stuff is what we evolved to do. Like that's how we organize and make group decisions. That's how we work as primates that have a system of communication called language. So you take that and put it into this new environment where there's all these opportunities for us to see every perspective and everybody jump in on the conversation. It's just that the con- parts of the things that are tweaked in that we haven't sorted out quite yet is,
Yeah.
what do we do when it comes to sanctioning things? What does it do when it comes to rewarding people for having good takes, punishing people for having bad takes, sorting out what is and isn't true? We're just going to go through a weird phase for a little while, possibly like 75 to 100 years. And on the other side of it, we'll figure it out. We always have.
Yeah.
In the middle of that, it's going to feel strange that we have to exert so much energy signaling who is us and who is them.
Yeah.
And we have to be very careful about when someone gets tossed into the them bucket, which can happen very easily. So I would say it takes on the appearance of polarization, but it's not quite the sort of polarization I think that you would find in like the U.S. Congress of 1925 or something like that. It's
Or the
different.
time that a guy beat the hell out of another guy in the United States
That's
Olympic
right.
game. Like
That's
it's
right.
always worth pointing out we have gone to war with each other before.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, I agree with you, and I think something worth pointing out. So we mentioned. I'm gonna tip the deck for all the listeners here. I have been working on a book on tribalism and groupthink for
Hmm.
about 3 years now, and so today I was like, I think I can bring on Dave McRaney to do research for me by talking to him and monetize me researching the book I'm writing. Good job, Heaton. This is some really good vertical work here.
That is
Uh,
the podcast secret sauce. You're
yeah,
doing a good job.
yeah. So everybody listening, this is really for my benefit. You guys are just carpooling in the back, and I'm just using Dave's research for me. But one of the things that I've really thought about with tribalism that I plan to mention in this is, I do not think that tribalism is that everybody's non-tribalistic and then people respond to something and become tribalistic. I think it's innate, and I think it's pretty similar to being horny, in that people are not completely sexually neutral and then they see a billboard with somebody in a bikini and they get an erection. But they can be exacerbated by this, or the same way like everybody wants food, but if you smell something, it can elicit that response from you. But it's not like you're not hungry until you smell something. And I think tribalism works much the same way. I think we have a very innate desire to be a part of a group and promote the group. And I
Hmm.
also think we have an innate desire to find another group to fight. I don't think it's just cooperative. I think there's also an inherently competitive element,
Hmm.
and that is constantly materializing from the emergent level all the way up through institutions and what we're doing. And we're seeing a lot of that right now play out in politics, kind of on a large scale, and we're not used to that kind of dominating everything. And so it's nasty and monolithic.
Yeah, I mean, we're in a no, we're not in a post-truth society. We're in a post-trust society. But I mean, that is in the sense. That's not to say that we'll never get the trust back. It's just that we're in the moment now where it's very difficult to ascertain whether or not the person that I'm dealing with virtually is a arguing with me in good faith. If they are a robot, if they're a paid representative of some organization that's trying to manipulate the public discourse, um, I'm not sure if that person is carefully navigating their arguments so as to not give up where they actually stand on the issue. It's difficult to ascertain trust. And in that environment, what humans as a social primate will do is try to signal trust as quickly as possible so that we can organize. And it's just old tools that are being applied in a new environment. Humans are not just a social animal, we are the most social animal. We are an ultra social animal. Like only like termites and bees are more social than we are. And
Right.
we have we're a certain kind of primate that survives by forming and maintaining groups. And so a huge portion of our innate psychology is about grouping up and then understand and then like navigating that with shame and embarrassment and ostracism. These innate things you cannot help but feel come from that system. And then our identities are mostly that which identify us as a member of a particular group or not a member of another group. And though it we we're in a Western industrialized uh, democratic society where we like to feel like all of our thoughts, feelings, and emotions were something that we decided on our own by reading a book, in a
Right.
library and then putting it down and going, "Aha, this is how I feel about this."
Uh-huh.
Um, the research for like the last 100 years says there's no, that is not how
It's
you.
yeah, it's pretty good that we make emotional decisions first, and then we rationalize them after the
Yes,
fact. That
and
I get the cupcake because I want the cupcake, and then they ask me why I got it. And, well, because I like supporting Cupcake Factory, whatever the thing is, right? We tend to think that way.
that's right. No, you're doing a you're making a great description there for what motivated reasoning is, right? Like when you want a piece of chocolate cake and you're on a diet and you come up with a bunch of arguments that are like, well, I worked out today, or oh, I really deserve this because I've been having a stressful week. Like these are your way. This is your way of rationalizing, justifying, and
Right.
explaining your behavior. Why would you?
And one of the biggest single behavioral impulses we have is to be accepted and promoted by our group and
Exactly.
to avoid sanctions by it. So if you and I are having a conversation about gun control and I am on team guns are awesome and you are on team guns are bad, we both have a very strong subconscious impulse to wind up wherever our team is, and it's unlikely that we're going to be able to just disentangle ourselves from that. I'm going to first and foremost want to defend whatever's going to keep me in the group more than some abstract truthy thing that might wind up kicking me out of the cave.
That is it. The if you take that like cake metaphor, and like if I asked you why did you get that cake? Now the real answer is something that you may not even be able to articulate. It may be so subconscious that you couldn't put it into words. It could be a chemical imbalance inside your body that's trying to be sorted out. It could be some sort of some priming mechanism that took place 2 weeks ago. It could be, I mean, at the very end of the day, we were talking about glucose levels and things like, but you're not going to say any of that. You're going to say this cogent argumentative thing that's going to make it seem like it was reasonable for you to do this.
Right.
Do this.
Yeah.
But if I ask you like, why did you vote for Donald Trump? It's going to be just like the cake thing. You're going to come up with a rational, reasonable explanation for why you did what you did, but it may be nowhere in the like galaxy of what actually motivated your behavior in that regard. So the the although there are people who have like political opinions and values that are based off of things that they have thoughtfully considered, for most issues, unless you're an expert or someone who is deeply impacted by the issue, usually the reason you have a position on the issue is because it affords you some sort of social reward or avoids some sort of social sanction. And that makes a lot of our political discourse performative. And it always has been. That's not something the internet created. It's just that the internet makes it much easier for us to form a group around something that would maybe just be neutral. This is what I'm sure you.
It's funny too, David, because I immediately, speaking on behalf of, I think, a wide swath of the audience, I immediately recoil when you say that, where I'm like, no, I alone am rational and all that. But then I think about it and I'm like, I do think that I am oftentimes more rational than the average bear. I do think I am capable of logical reasoning, but at the same time, I have to acknowledge that there is an emotional tax that I pay and a social penalty that I pay if I take a position that is wildly unpopular with my friend group.
Mhm.
So were I to find, I live in Austin, Texas, were I to find data that I looked at and I was like, hot damn, the vaccine does cause autism. Like, man, I'm not going to take that, right? I would have some real social issues that would come out of that if I adopt if vaccines cause autism. That would, yeah, I'm not going to get invited to stuff anymore.
Mhm.
And if I don't know, you're a Democrat living in New York City, and you read a transcript and you go, I think Donald Trump actually is the good. Like you're not just going to waltz through that as a Trump supporter. And the way our brains work is your brain is way, 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 way more concerned about getting exiled from your tribe than it is about 3% optimal economic growth on a macro level. Like
It's
that
the
doesn't
number
really
one.
affect you.
It's the highest motivation we have. Like Brooke Harrington, the sociologist, she told me that the E equals MC square of social science is the fear of social death is greater than the fear of physical
Wait,
death.
hold on. Brooke Harrington. Let me add this to my book notes. Brooke
She's
Harrington.
fantastic.
Great. Thank you.
The fear of social death is greater than the fear of physical death.
Yeah.
If the if the Titanic is sinking and your physical self and your social self are looking for the boats, you will treat your social self like the child that goes on the boat, and you will let your physical self die. We've seen this
Yeah.
with the vaccine hesitancy, right? People are willing to die for signaling their non-support of the vaccine. Um, that because, but they probably would rationalize it by saying it was because of this, and this thing I read here, and blah blah blah. But that is not the actual reason why they're exhibiting that behavior. Um,
Or like
the
one of my comedian friends talks about how he's a coward, and so like if China invaded, he would just be like, oh, let's just learn Mandarin. But most people don't think that way.
That's
Most people
right.
don't think like, yeah, I'll just learn Mandarin. They're like, I will fight you on the hill, and like it is more important to me that I remain in my group and that my group have high esteem of me than I run off as a coward and join your group.
Yeah, I mean, uh, like the one of the important things here, I think, should be worth pointed out is that this is also not irrational. Like it is rational to do this. This is
Yeah,
a thing that you are rationally. It is better for your survival to do this. You're more likely to make it if you are ingratiated to your group at all times. And it's also important to note that reasoning is not logic. So big R reason, like the one that we use to describe things like propositional logic and that sort of thing, that's a true real thing that is very valuable that we invented. But reasoning in a psychological sense is just coming up with reasons for why you think, feel, and believe a certain way, or coming up with reasons for why you have a certain plan of action. Um, and reasons in the form usually of justifications, explanations, and rationalizations. Why would we innately do that? Because we're imagining this audience who's going to hear what we're going to say, almost like a jury, right? Like
I'm
if
going to be
someone,
around the campfire saying why I decided to go with the sling as opposed to the spear to kill that giraffe because I am very concerned that I not be exiled based on my giraffe killing ineptitude.
yeah, you want to be maintain your position as your reputation. It's all reputation manages for you to be a valued member of your group.
Mm.
That is one of the most innate things we experience. It is the highest goal, much higher than accuracy goals. But it's also, since we have a competing value in our culture of individualism and being considered a rational thinker, we will present as if that is the actual motivation, when the true motivation is something that we may not even be able to see or feel within ourselves, or articulate within ourselves, even though that's where it's coming from. And the bottom line is that um, we value being good members of our groups more than we value being correct.
Yeah, that
And
makes a lot of sense to me because our brain's not designed for accuracy. Our brain's designed for survival. And a great
yes,
example of this is we don't think in terms of sum totals, we think in terms of proportions. And the reason for that is for example, I don't, this might be from Thinking Fast and Slow. I don't remember which book I got it from. It might be Cass Sunstein. But if, if you and I, David, are going to go get lunch here in Austin and we're going to go get sandwiches. And I'm like, you know what? Those sandwiches are just as good as sandwiches a block away, but those sandwiches cost $5 less. Let's just walk a block and save the $5. Great, we'll go do that. If I'm looking at a blazer that costs $500 and I can walk one block north to get one that costs $495, I'm like, well, that's stupid. I'm not going to do that. Like,
yep,
why?
yep,
It's the exact. It's $5 is $5. 10 minutes is 10 minutes, right?
yep,
But we
yep.
we don't think that way, presumably because when we were monkeys, you didn't need to know how many apples were on the tree. You just needed to know which tree had more apples. You just needed to know the proportion of it. And I
Proportions, yep.
think following that logic, if I believe Mormons popped into my head, but there's I'm not picking on you guys. I'm picking on a social a very community oriented church, which is why I picked them. But like if you're a Mormon, and you decide that no, you have more of a Presbyterian outlook on life than a Mormon outlook, that's a kind of abstract thing that's probably not going to change your day to day. But the social tax of leaving your community, through which so much of your happiness, social connections, network connections are based, that's a real, actual toll right there. Or to because I don't want to pick on you guys Mormons, to pick on flat earthers who I'm happy to pick on. Like unless you're unless you're like an astronaut or something, I don't know that that's ever going to affect you on a day-to-day basis. But if your whole community is the flat earth convention and you decide that's not a thing anymore, you lose all your friends. You're not going to get to have sex anymore. You're going to
Hmm.
so logically speaking, for you as an individual, it makes more sense to be inaccurate but popular.
I got, I love you. You mentioned flat earthers. I got to contribute a little bit to that documentary, and I actually went to Sweden and interviewed Mark Sargent live on stage
Oh
after that
wow.
documentary,
Yeah. And he's
because
like
part
the
of
archbishop of flat earthers for
that's
anybody
right. So
unfamiliar. Yeah.
because like and I'm not trying to plug it right now. It just happens to be part of the conversation. I have a book about all this coming out later in the year, and in the book, I talk all about these persuasion techniques that take all of this stuff into account. And the organizers of this event, they were like, come on stage and use the persuasion technique that you're talking about with Mark Sargent. And it was great to meet him. I remember backstage, I was like, look, I want you to know I have no desire to make you look silly or make fun of you on stage. And he was like, hey, it's fine. If you want to, if you want to do that, that's
He's
cool with
probably
me.
got that before.
Yeah,
He's
he did a
probably thick
commercial for
skinned.
Life. I think it was LifeLock or something like that. He did a commercial for that where he's like, "It's so easy, an idiot can do it," and he held up a flat Earth. Um, so he doesn't care. The that's a really great example of like a couple of things like the minimal group paradigm and other stuff that we've talked about on the podcast. Like that's
Well, yeah,
But it's
can you
also
walk us through minimal group paradigm as well?
absolutely. I'll bounce out of flat Earth into that
Sure.
because one of the things I love about flat Earth, one of the, by the way, use it forever. I do it because they're pretty neutral and apolitical, but they describe politics
Also, I'm
perfectly.
not going to piss off anybody who listens to my program. Like if we kept using
You don't know.
guns and Mormons, I might lose some folks. But flat Earth, I could afford to lose.
Yeah, the flat Earth thing is a great example of some of the things we were talking about earlier. Like it is so easy to form a community now, and the this has helped conspiratorial communities form. It's helped anti-vaccination efforts, the kind that go with COVID-19 form. It's helped very strange political opinions form, but it's also helped, with all sorts of efforts to fight racial injustice. It helps to reform policies that haven't been reformed in forever. It's helped after COVID-19 to get everyone to agree, like, why are we going to work when we could do this from home? Like, it's just a thing that is happening to us that has some strange effects because our political systems are mostly these like 19th century institutions that you had to have a horse to get around to talk to people. Like
Yeah.
they aren't built for this kind of discourse. Flat Earth really shows that because they are a group of people who were not invited to the conversation that was taking place in physics and astronomy and so forth. They were definitely never invited to the any ivory tower, but they're smart, capable people that can read and they have access to all the world's information. And their observations are, it kind of does look like maybe the earth is flat if you just look like this. And they have a deep distrust of institutions. They have a deep distrust of government. They have a deep distrust. They consider NASA to be part of this military industrial complex. And they have a shared anxiety. So one of the key components of like confirmation bias is like you can imagine I like to use woods examples. You're at a tent in the woods and you hear a noise and you're like, could be bad. I have a negative affect in my body. I have an anxiety. So I'm going to go looking for confirmation with my flashlight that my anxiety is justified. And as I look around, I may find nothing. I may find a false positive, whatever. That's the reason I'm doing my thing. But I have a confirmation bias here where I wish to confirm my anxiety is just. You get a million people who have a shared anxiety and you put them online and they're all looking for confirmation that their anxiety is justified. And they start finding a few things here and there that seem to suggest that it is. And they start being able to meet with each other. And now you have a community of people whose the centerpiece, the nucleus, the gravitational center of their social structure is this shared anxiety. It doesn't matter now whatever they talk about. They just want to feel justified that they're upset about this particular thing. And that's like politics in its nutshell, right? Like there's a shared value, a shared anxiety. And then this manifests into having a group or a tribe, as we've been saying. And once that happens, all the primate stuff kicks in, and now it's more important to keep the group alive than anything that formed the group. The founding principles of the organization are irrelevant now because what's important now is that we have a group of people that meet up and talk about stuff, and have conventions and dating apps and all this other stuff that flat earthers have. But also, they're going to
They've
eventually
got
do
dating
the.
apps.
They do.
All right, okay, well, add it to the
Because
list.
as that was told by Mark, it's very difficult to date because if on the first date you say, "So, what do you think about this whole flat Earth thing?" so
Nice.
so, but
No,
I
I
believe
might jump into that. I'm like, all right, here's the deal. You're real cute. I disagree with you on the earth, but you don't seem to be mad at me that I voted for Gary Johnson in 2016. So, like, I'm willing to have a truce on this if you are. We can
sure
just move forward and see what happens.
that's
Yeah.
where the chocolate cake thing comes in again, right? You're like, "Why am I dating this person?" Well, because of this, and this.
Hmm.
Then you disregard the flat Earth thing because of your motivated reasoning. Um, But another thing I love about the flat earthers is they will eventually probably burn out on all this because there's since they don't trust scientific institutions, but they do trust the scientific method, they're doing their own research. And when you do research, you start seeing that the Earth is indeed an oblate spheroid
You know, like
floating through
doesn't that
space.
documentary end where they've very cleverly, like I was actually very impressed. What they did was they set up a series of wooden planks with holes drilled through them, and fired a laser through it. And the idea was they're over a course of a mile or something, and they're like, if the world is flat, then the laser is going to go through all of these. And I don't know how they made sure that they were X feet off the ground or whatever. But if it's round, there's going to be a curvature. It's not going to work. And I'm
Right.
like, that's actually a really clever thing to do. And then the final
Yes.
scene is a guy going, huh. and just looking
Yes,
at
and that's an old experiment. That's what I think is amazing. They're redoing all of the experiments we already did, and so and the truth will just simply win in this scenario because the thing they're doing is disregarding the other people who did those experiments before them who they don't trust. And I see the exact same thing taking place all across the political spectrum. A lot of people are having the exact same discussions and arguments that were in tomes that you would learn in university and our philosophical rhetorical combat that has already took place 1,000 years ago. We're recapitulating all of that, and the same thing is going to happen with the flat earthers. We'll eventually come back to where we started because everyone's onboarding. The people who weren't invited to these conversations are onboarding, and the anxieties and values that they have in the modern era are how they're forming communities to have those conversations. And it'll play out like it has forever. It's just weird to be in the middle of it, right? And the minimal group paradigm comes in here, which is there's right after a lot of research in psychology that you would learn in a 101 class comes from the early days of when they were trying to figure out what happened in World War II. They were like, how could these apocalyptic things happen? How could these genocides take place?
it's a good topic to think about.
Because a lot of people, a lot of psychologists, like, so the Holocaust, like, how in the world could that happen, and could it happen again? And is it something that's innate, or is it something that was particular to history? And they also wanted to understand demagogues and that sort of thing. So a lot of research was done in that. And one of the researchers and all that, Henri Tajfel,
How do you spell Tajfeld?
Tajfel.
Great, thank you.
Tajfel wanted to the prevailing wisdom, which also this reminds me, like with the flat earthers, like they'll eventually get enough anomalies in their models that they have to retire their models, but they won't retire the model just because one experiment suggests they're wrong. And that's exactly what's happened in science forever. Like, we didn't throw away the first few things that suggested that a spontaneous generation where like life comes out of mud and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
we didn't throw it away just because we found a couple of experiments that suggested it was wrong. It took a lot of experiments before we gave up on that. And that's what they'll go through too. So in the prevailing wisdom about what happened with like Hitler and the Nazis was that it was about a really angry leader, then that people were being like mysteriously hypnotized by the anger and they were scared of him. And Tajfeld thought that there's probably something more fundamental going on than that, because it wasn't true across every society, and not everyone thought that Hitler was a cool dude. So he was like, there. I wonder if it's possible that people group up over things, and if so, what is the minimal like identifier that a community could form around? Like, what is if I like what is the like least salient thing that I could form that a group of people would say, this is why we are together. This is why we are a group.
So he's thinking in terms of like, okay, the lowest one is language or accent or skin color or eye color, and he's trying to figure out what's the minimum threshold you need to hit before that us versus them
Yeah, yeah.
binary clicks in.
And when he was starting this research, he wasn't even going as far as we're going. He was still at the level of like shared anxieties or shared values, or some sort of something happened 100 years ago where you're still mad at that group of people for doing that thing historically. He so he's like, I'm going to start at zero and then work my way up to the thing. And he came up with this test. The first run of it, they showed people a photograph of some dots on a page, and they said, estimate how many dots you see here. And they didn't actually record what people said. They just randomly sorted them and told them that some of them overestimated and some of them underestimated. And after that, they said, you are an overestimator or you are an underestimator. And then he started doing other situations, putting them into situations where they could allot financial, like cash rewards for other experiments, or judge other experiments where people had done different tasks well or not so well. But the other people in the other experiments were also labeled as underestimators and overestimators. And what he found right away was that people, no matter what, would just favor their own group. If they had suddenly become an underestimator, then underestimators could do no wrong. If they had suddenly become an overestimator, same thing. And when they would like split money rewards up, they would be willing to take less money in a task like that if as long as the other group got less than their split. So they would even allow themselves to be hurt as long as the other group was hurt more. That sort of thing. And he
Fascinating.
was
So wait,
shocked. He was like,
both of us can get we both teams can get 3 donuts each, but we would rather have 2 donuts if you get 1 donut.
yeah,
Like we would rather there be a
exactly.
gap than okay. That explains a lot about problems in humanity right there.
That's right. And it was, and only this group that they had been assigned that they weren't really a part of, that they were not a part of 5 seconds before that. Then they immediately started exhibiting these behaviors.
Mm.
And this is one of the most replicated things in psychology. And you can do it with anything. They'll have you like look at a painting and say, do you like it or not? And then they'll say, well, you're a fan of this artist or this artist. Or you can do this in classrooms. Will do this sometimes where you will just, some people have to some people will wear a blue shirt, some people wear a yellow shirt, or you could be wearing glasses or not wearing
Which
glasses.
people naturally just like it is so intuitive to the human experience that we don't even think about it. So I think when I first got interested in all of this, now that it pops into my mind, when I was working for Congress, my dad came and visited me, and I took dad to watch the marching bands over at the Armory in Washington D.C. because dad loves big band music. Like he drives to work listening to John Philip Sousa. I suspect the reason he doesn't like terrorists because they're just lackluster when it comes to national anthems and things like that. But he really likes marching band music. So I being a dutiful good son, took him to the Armory, and they were watching all this. So we're watching the bands play. And at one point, the band split, and they go to either end of the stadium, and band A starts playing its bit, and then band B, it stops, band B starts playing its bit, and then without any direction, the two halves of the stadium start cheering their band. And I was the only person in the stadium that was like, what the hell? Like that was one band 20 seconds ago. I don't know any of these people. I just happen to be on the north side of the stadium as opposed to like why are like how did you but I was the only guy thinking that. Everybody else there was like, oh, okay, this is our team. Great. We're gonna cheer for our team. Like that's what we do as humans. In the same way that we eat food and we copulate through sex, we just naturally form teams and yay, our team, boo the other team.
Yep. And the bizarre extension of this, and the best person to talk about this is Dan Kahan at the Yale Cultural Cognition Project. He's done some amazing research where like you can influence people's ability to like solve math problems and stuff just by telling them that the math problems, or the outcome of the math problem will determine whether or not this gun control policy is good or not.
Yeah.
Like you can do, if you take any raw factual
motivated reasoning, right? It's more important for me to promote my team than it is for me to know how reality works.
Yeah, it'll affect what they call numeracy, right? So just by making in one group, you tell them that the numbers are about like a skin cream effectiveness. You tell the other group that it's about a gun control policy's effectiveness. And all of a sudden, once it's charged with some sort of political concept, people's math abilities suddenly get really bad if the outcome would show that their side is wrong.
So then
about the issue.
Is the trick then to have intermediates present questions to us involving skin cream, and then we make up our minds and they go, turns out you're not in favor of gun control. And we go, shit, damn it. That's it. Like, is that what we should be doing?
You would think that, but when you debrief people, they will refuse to believe that was actually their answers.
Okay.
What it demonstrates is that
can I tell you what I think would be a really good
sure.
test? Feel free to do this. In listening to your show, and I think it was specifically the gentleman Cahill that you just mentioned a moment ago, talking about these kind of experiments and how people will be cognitively affected by them. If I wanted to try to get people to think for themselves, what I would do is say, hey, Democrats, we'll kick it off with them. We're trying to solve this issue. The Republicans refused to participate. They did not want to participate because already there's like a spurt now of like, yeah, dumb Republicans, they didn't want to participate. And so only 2 Democrats are here. And both of them, and then you give them a biography. And one of them's like a union leader, and the other one's a public school teacher. And you make very clear they're both really good Democrats. And then you have them represent the issue and use words like social justice and things like that so that there's not really any tribal identifiers that you can latch onto. Or if you're going to do it with conservatives, like one of them's a preacher, one of them's an Army veteran, and they're talking about fiscal response, like all those things, then you can maybe bypass some of those triggers and have the person actually think about what works better as opposed to just which one's more blue or red.
This would
work. If you can get me $1 million for that, that'd be awesome.
This would, I will do my best. I'll make some phone calls. There's a good chance that that'll move the needle some. I know that there are experiments where they call it it's like value affirmation seems to work really well. Where if you give people an introductory um, panel of questions that are meant to show them that they have a strong value that is apolitical, like
Hmm, okay.
they have a value. In other words, you give a person an opportunity to feel like they are a good person.
Right.
Then you present them an issue that would have previously been the way they determined they were a good person. They're more likely to look at that in a more neutral way. So you affirm people's values and identities outside of politics, then introduce the political issue second, and people tend to be a lot less polarized with
Interesting.
their answers.
Okay. Because
Um,
now it's sort of rooted in my personal identity and how I view myself, as
yes,
opposed to just being a proxy for tribe.
yes,
Hmm,
yes,
okay.
and it's also very useful to try to get people into an objective frame where uh, you get them to imagine a day in the life of someone who is on the other political team,
Yeah.
and then you present issues to how you show that person's how they're affected by issues, and then you ask them questions related to the issue, and people tend to soften their polarization quite a bit in that regard too.
Yeah.
But what Kahan was very adamant about, like from his perspective, the real danger here is allowing something to become politicized. That, and he was adamant that any issue can become politicized. It
Yes.
doesn't matter. Flip flops can become politicized.
Uh-huh.
He said all this before the masks, and then the
Whether
masks.
you, I mean, there's a whole book called, what is it, the Ford and the Prius and the Lex. I can't remember what it is, but like, if there's a comedian who has a joke that if you're driving a Prius in Los Angeles, you don't need an Obama sticker. We know. And conversely, if you're driving a Ford truck in Texas that has like a gun rack on the back, we probably don't need to, like, a lot of the time those things can be signals,
Right.
right?
And the the more contact we have with people, just the very famous the contact hypothesis. The more contact we have with people who we consider them,
Hmm.
and the more we feel anxious, the more we feel uncertain, which is something that's definitely part of our current sort of information ecosystem, and the more we feel we are in competition for resources, the more strongly we will work to identify ourselves as an us.
Hmm.
And the more strongly we will sanction those who seem to be demonstrating through signaling that they are them. And that makes it very likely that we will quickly politicize neutral fact-based things. Like there's no real big debate about like fruit bats and volcanoes right now in political domains, but there totally could be within like a week if it became politicized.
Hmm.
Just so
And,
happens
and, and
climate
and
change
if
is
I'm
in that
following you
domain.
correctly, what's going on is when I am experiencing moments of anxiety or duress, whatever is inducing that, I am going to respond by attempting to signal to the people around me, I am on our team. It's important to me that you know I'm on our team, and I am looking for opportunities to signal that tribal allegiance. And so I'm going to graft it onto things that might otherwise not be a tribal signifier.
Yeah, you can think of it like an earthquake or a hurricane or something just took place,
Hmm.
and so I'm very eager to establish trust and bonds with my surroundings, with my social surroundings, and then I understand that we're in an information ecosystem where there's going to be a lot of rumors. There's going to that we're going to have to sort out what's happening over time, and I'm not going to, I want to do that in a group of people that I can trust about to help me with the very simplest things, which is food and shelter and all those things. And I want to make sure I'm not dealing with people who are going to mislead me, who have nefarious intent, who are going to like post-apocalyptically stick me in a basement somewhere. So I'm these things are salient to us, and we can those visceral reactions can be stoked very quickly, and it's one of the oldest tricks in the book to uh, take something that the politician in question is trying to make money off of or gain power from, and turn it into a debate on people's values that are related more to their political persuasion.
Hmm.
And once you do that, you can do that. Once you learn the alchemy of that, you can do it to just about any issue. And we're very susceptible to it. Even when we know that we're susceptible to it, we're very susceptible to it.
Great. Okay, so I have a, I think, I don't want to call it a counter thesis. I have an adjacent thesis to what you've been
Let's go.
talking about. and I want to compare and contrast, and also let me know where I'm wrong. So at the beginning of the show, I asked, are we polarized, and what is causing it? And the answer was we are basically we are equally tribal as we've ever been. This is a constant. However, as I gather from you, David, technology is altered. We haven't caught up with that. And so it sounds like the polarization we're experiencing is kind of like how we're not designed to eat hamburgers in the Serengeti. So when confronted with that new technology, we become fat. That's kind of my read on what you're
That's a big part
indicating.
of it. Yes.
Okay, so I don't disagree with any of that, but what I see on my end that I think is causing polarization is I think that the amount of kind of Jackson Pollock overlapping Venn diagram identities we have is collapsing. And I tend to kind of take the Robert Putnam bowling alone position on this, that if you go back 40 years, 50 years, you were a Republican and a Democrat, but you were also a deacon at the Baptist church, which probably had Republicans and Democrats in it. You felt very strongly about the town you lived in. You were more
Hmm.
concerned about local affairs than you were about national affairs. Maybe you were a part of an ethnic society. You were, in the Greek fraternity or the German house. You were in a Rotary Club. You were in an Elks Lodge. You were part of a garden club. All these different things. So what I think is, as those have collapsed, people's need for being a part of a group has not dissipated, and politics has really been the last man standing. And so people have just gone into that. And then further exacerbating that, I think, is that we do crave having an enemy. And so I
Hmm.
see the moments of the most intense amicability and polity in America's history basically been when we're fighting Nazis or Soviets. And when they go away, we're like, well, I got to hate somebody. I guess I hate Democrats or Republicans or whatever. So I think technology is a part of it, but I see it more as a kind of cultural atrophy that's prompting people to shift their groupishness into unhealthy and monolithic forms. Do you agree? Do you disagree? What do you think?
I totally agree with that. There are some caveats. The Yes, the bowling alone fragmentation of culture is a thing. We don't have a monoculture anymore, and I think that's awesome. And I've gladly pushed monoculture into the ocean and watch it sink to the bottom. I want massive fragmentation, and I want everything to be chaotic and weird for a while. So I like this because I think I'm very Pollyanna about it, and I think we're going to be fine. But the um, we also became very secular, and we're getting more and more secular. But also, I feel like these things that we're giving up were always proxies in the first place. They were illusory to begin with, and I feel like we're headed more to a more authentic version of being separate. While we go through a phase where everything's performative, it's like we get to go through the weird times together. But on the other side of that, I think we will form communities around actual things we actually care about instead,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't think we actually give a shit about Democrats and Republicans. I think that has always been a stand in. Um, I think that religions have almost always been a stand in. I don't think people go to church because they want to discuss the Bible or the Torah or anything. I think they go there for the community that it affords them. The There are better ways to have communities. There are better ways for us to group up. And there are issues that are actually important to us, and we're just discovering them right now. There's a lot of low hanging fruit, and we'll pick that first. So that's one thing. Also, I totally agree with you on all this. And I think you don't just see it with politics. We're trying to find that those something as stand-ins. Uh, you may have noticed that fandoms have become super wild here lately, right?
Oh, right. Yeah.
Star Wars fandoms and Harry Potter fandoms,
Right.
and boy, the social rewards and costs are really powerful there. Like the
I
people
yeah.
are.
One of my friends who's been on the program used to work for Marvel, and there is a tabloid about writers for Marvel, and I was blown away by this. And there were all these fights of like, this, can you believe they did this to this character and all that kind of. It was really heated. And like from my perspective, I was like, I don't really care if Mister Fantastic, has a mistress, or I don't know what the issues are, right? But you're right. The like I am very much into Star Trek and Star Wars, and the fandom has become a sense of identity rather than just a thing we enjoy doing.
Yeah, and because we're so because which is your argument for just a second ago, which I agree with. Like we're so eager for identifiers of self, identifiers of group self, and those are much safer than using masks to identify yourself, or Donald Trump's inaugural rally as a way of saying like it was the biggest in the world. I'm looking right at it. Like it's much safer. then there's other things,
Well,
but
and
they
I'll add, like,
totally.
because like you brought up religion a second ago. I think that's another big part of this. I don't think we're actually more secular than we used to be. I think that that's just migrated into politics. And the big problem I have with it is I can be a Star Trek fan and really have a sense of identity about Star Trek and have like an ethical system a la religion born out of Star Trek. But I don't have to meet all my Star Trek buddies to talk about how much I hate Star Wars and how we're going to beat them at the box office. I can be really into Harry Potter and not hate the Golden Compass or whatever. But if you're picking politics, it is by nature competitive. And so you're picking a thing where you're bonding over mutual combat with another group.
Yeah, and that's the. I think this brings us to like the thing, right? Like we're in a world now where we're very eager to identify and to group up, and so you end up with people who make I only eat plants my identity, and then you have another group of people who are like I like meat and I don't like you because of it, and that's my identity. That's weird and stupid. So the but like in our politics, this is ostensibly about how we decide. You have things that are problems in your area. I have things that are problems in my area. I have life experiences
Mhm.
that generate and distribute all sorts of weird elements of privilege, and you have different ones. We have different values. We want to solve all this so that we live in a better society together, which is going to involve us compromising and coming to decisions that work for the best for both of us.
Mhm.
For that to happen, we have to have conversations where we entertain each other's perspectives and appeal to the truth, which is higher than both of our perspectives. If we engage with each other at the level of we're going to debate, and at the end of that debate, I'm right and you're wrong, or vice versa, and that's where we're going to move forward, nothing is
And
going to work.
the point is the fight, and the point is the team, not the knowledge gained or the outcome of it. Yeah.
Yeah, we have to reach a point, and we will, but it's going to take a lot of effort and a lot of purposeful effort to be able to uh, disagree in a way that benefits both of us instead of attempting to zero sum this shit, which is
Yeah.
not going to help anyone. It's I understand when we're in a very disjointed, complicated, fragmented, chaotic information ecosystem, the desire is to get some sort of simplicity, normalcy, and like this get some solid ground underneath our feet. And that comes a lot of times that comes with can we just all agree that this is true and that's false? And yes, I know I don't like this politician, wasn't the best choice, but like can we just like get behind this politician and like do whatever this person says?
Or
I
like
feel
a lot of the. Oh, sorry. Please continue.
no, I understand that that's like a yearning that we have because things are so chaotic, and it doesn't help that we had a pandemic and then almost World War III right after that. It's a time with a lot of anxiety, but the I don't want I'm very into proselytizing this concept of I use the dress as the example. You remember the dress,
Oh,
right?
the blue versus the
The
brown dress. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I for my book I went to NYU and spoke to the neuroscientist who studied that thing and figured out why we saw it differently. The short version of that is the more time you spend around sunlight, the more your brain subtracts the blue from the color
Oh,
spectrum when you see
wow.
an
Wait, so
overexposed
office
image.
workers saw it different than
Yeah,
like agricultural workers?
that's
Wow.
pretty much it.
Okay.
The more time you spend around daylight, uh, the more you will subtract the blue, and the more time you spend around artificial light, the more yellow you subtract from it, resulting in this was an ambiguous image. The image is ambiguous. It's neither it's neither color. It's whatever your brain resolves. Your brain will disambiguate the ambiguity, just the same way that it tries to find certainty whenever it's uncertain. And it does that using your priors. Your priors in this are your life experiences around sunlight. In a political discourse, be the same thing. We have an ambiguous issue, an uncertain issue. I'm going to use my life experiences
Right.
up to this point to disambiguate it and resolve that in some sort of conclusion. If you imagine the people who are looking at the blue dress and the yellow dress, and they have an argument about it, where the point of the argument, the point of the debate is, I need you to see this the way I see it. I need you to see that you're wrong and I'm right.
Mm.
Even if you win, you lose because you aren't getting to the actual truth of why do we disagree on this. And if you
And
did, you would
you're
suddenly
losing that other viewpoint on the aforementioned hill metaphor. If we're all looking in different directions, you've now lost it. You've convinced everybody to look from your direction, and you're not going to see it sneaking up on you from behind.
we both lose when we debate in that manner.
Yeah.
And that is the precipice upon which we find ourselves in modern political discourse, that we have to go past. We have to be able to be okay with differing perspectives and disagree on issues, and allow those things to float around so that we can reach the deeper truths and solve the bigger problems. So that's the thing that I hope we were able to push through the tribalism too. It's totally okay to have our groups and tribes that are around the values and things, even if they're weird values like flat earth stuff, as long as we're able to communicate with one another in a way where the point of the conversation is to determine, why do we disagree? And that allows both parties to sort of solve a mystery within themselves that will open up the ability to tap into mysteries that we weren't even aware were part of our lives. And that's why I love the dress as sort of a metaphor for all of that.
Uh, I'm with you 100% on that. I think I am I'm sure I've been wrong. I'll back up. I think I'm wrong about 30% of the stuff I currently believe. That's my estimate. I don't know. I don't know which 30% though. So I need help from people. I need people to let me know when I'm wrong. And I know I'm wrong because I've been wrong about a bunch of stuff previously. Like I used to be a like really intense Eastern Orthodox Christian, like was thinking about the priesthood. Now I'm kind of a low wattage friendly atheist. I can't be right simultaneously about these things. I've been fundamentally wrong about how the universe works at least once.
Mm-hmm.
And I assume that it's the same with politics. And so I would like to hear from other people. I find different viewpoints to be very diagnostically useful. I'll say, like, anything that Cato and Alexandria Ocasio Cortez agree on, flat out, I'm in favor of right off the bat. Like, if they can find middle, like, if there's something that AOC's like, that's bullshit, and Cato's like, agreed, that's bullshit, I'm like, absolutely scrap whatever that is. If you two guys figure that one out. And a lot of the time too, I don't think it's just a question of losing viewpoints, which are good because we can. If I were to form an island government with only people that agree with me, there's going to be stuff I'm not aware of. It's just it's not possible that we're going to have the entirety of it covered. So I want to have different viewpoints, and I think a lot of the time too, we get into this weird habit of thinking that we're all we're forming these political tribes that are completely juxtaposed to one another, as if I'm on team anarchism and you're on team Orwellian
Mm.
nightmare. And in reality, we have a lot of shared values, and a lot of the conflicts we're having are really more about which of our shared values we're going to prioritize, not whether the value itself is good. Democrats tend to emphasize egalitarianness more than they emphasize individual liberty, but they still like both. Republicans tend to emphasize individual liberty over egalitarian, still like both, right? It's not that they're completely juxtaposed, or even like certain moral issues like homosexuality. I look at that and go, to me, it's more of a time lag than a juxtaposition. Like if you go back, I think 2012 is when the Democratic Party endorsed gay marriage. Like from my perspective, both parties sucked on gay marriage up until very recently, and it's not that they're really opposed to one another. It's that the Republicans are usually 8 to 12 years behind whatever the Democrats are up to. But that's a different way of looking at it than there's black and white and all these different things. And anyway, there's a long way to say I'm in your church, David. I'm on board, David McRaney, with what you're talking about, and I suspect the listeners are as well. So, on that note, as we wrap up, then, given that we've acknowledged that we're all monkeys with wristwatches that are just trying to stay in our tribe, and we're terrified of being sanctioned, and we're motivated reasoners, and all these things, noting that, what do we do to endeavor to be as rational as possible, or as clear thinking as possible, or at least to not inflame these tribal impulses when we're confronting policy issues and value discussions?
Wow. Okay. I'm going to save the planet real fast here.
Yeah, just yeah. If you could wrap that up real quick in like 15-second soundbite for me, that'd be great.
Look, my friend Will Storr, who writes books on the similar topics, he once asked me. He gave me this thought experiment that I love, and it goes like so. I'll try to remember it. Ask yourself: have you ever been wrong about uh, anything? Right?
Mhm.
And do you currently think that you're right about everything? And so you add those two together, and you're like, okay, cool. So that means you must be wrong about some things right now. So what are those things?
Right. Yeah.
And if you can't answer that question, then you need to make it a priority in your life to go figure out what those things are.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's a very simple way to move forward. Now, you would, if you can accept that with yourself, you would want somebody on the other side of an issue to have that kind of empathy for you.
Yeah.
So you should afford them that same empathy and begin there with rapport,
Mhm.
build trust, make it so the people we're dealing with, whether it's online or in person, we can have that conversation across from each other at a table over wine and or a beer and a hamburger, or whatever, in which I could totally disagree with what you're saying, but kind of dig the way you think about stuff.
Yeah.
And then we can work together to solve the mysteries behind why do we disagree on this issue? Because in that is the actual truth that is escaping both of us right now. And that's the better form of political discourse that I'm proselytizing.
One of my he's both a listener of the show and he's a friend of mine that lives here named in Austin named Nick, and we'll hang out every couple of months. And it's funny because when he disagrees with me, he'll get excited and be like, "I think you're 100% wrong on this," but it's so clear when he's talking to me that the fact that he thinks that I'm 100% wrong on a given issue is in no way militating against him liking me. So it's really fun when we actually have a different perspective because there's no threat to me. Whereas with other people, I can sense it when like their eyes get big and they're like, you had dinner with Megan McCain 4 years ago, like like whatever that thing is, and they start to freak out. It is nice, and I'll add as a quick side note, and then we can plug your forthcoming book. One of the concepts that I've learned from your show is that of Bayesian reasoning,
Oh yeah, yeah,
which
Bayesian.
I is brand new to me. If I understand it correctly, rather than saying I believe this or I believe that, Bayesian reasoning would be me saying. I, Andrew Heaton, am 95% convinced that tariffs don't work very well. In terms of welfare, I guess I'm like 60% on UBI or something like that, right? Where I'm alerting you to how strongly I think this is a thing. That way, we kind of know how to square off on it. Am I hitting that?
Yeah, Bayesian reasoning is sort of the not motivated reasoning kind of thing. Although I would, with the caveat that I say that all reasoning is motivated,
Right.
but Bayesian reasoning is an attempt to not be black and white, 100 and 0 on everything. You would, I've had it explained to me about 1,000 different ways. There's a formula. Thomas Bayes created this in the 1700s. He was a mathematician. It was lost. He didn't even talk about it very much, but it was found in his writings, and it turned out to be really cool. His original experiment, he had a table behind him where he couldn't see it, and somebody would roll like a billiard ball on the table, and it would come to a full stop, and then he would guess where's the billiard ball, and he'd write it on a piece of paper, and then the assistant would roll another one on the table, and all he could ask is it to the left or the right of the first ball, and they would tell him, and he had a formula that where you could work out what was happening mathematically. Was that like if the ball was almost on the edge, it couldn't the other ball couldn't be too far on that edge; it would fall off. If most of them were on this side, he could really start to work out where it's at.
Hmm,
And
interesting. Okay.
mathematically, it showed that the more evidence the more evidence um, you take in, the more accurate your belief becomes, because each piece of evidence is an evidence for or against your original proposition. So that's one way of looking at it. Another thing you think of, Julia Galiff told me to imagine you've been in a
I
car
love
wreck.
Julia Galiff, by the way. She's
She's
fantastic.
fantastic.
Yeah.
She said, imagine you've been in a car wreck, and do you like? Let's say you were fiddling with the radio and you accidentally bumped the person in front of you. Does that mean you're a bad driver? And like, we wouldn't. A Bayesian would say this is evidence that suggests that maybe I am. So if I was 100% sure I was a great driver, I should at least bump down to 99.
Okay.
But if you're a motivated reasoner, you really want to think of yourself as a good driver because that makes you a good member of your group. You might say, "This in no way has anything to do with my driving ability. I, I could anybody could have been looking at the radio like that. That has nothing to do with my driving ability." So that's sort of how the two fight each other. Another way she described it to me was, if I flip a coin and I know what the outcome is, and I say then I ask you, what are the odds that this is heads or tails? What are the odds that this is heads? Your answer is going to be different from my answer because I actually know what it is. So it demonstrates that the probability is not in the coin, it's in the brain. And the probabilities differ based off how much information we've gathered. So all this together says the Bayesian way of looking at things is, if you have a hamster, uh, and you haven't seen it today and you're at work, and I ask you, is your hamster alive? You shouldn't say yes. What you should say is, I am 75% certain that my
Uh-huh.
hamster is alive.
Yeah.
you can apply that to any of your beliefs. And it's important that's also true in all the persuasion techniques that I outline in How Minds Change, where one of the first questions they usually ask in a actually directed persuasion attempt is you ask a person, like, whatever the issue is. Let's say they make a claim that the earth is flat, or they make a claim that, or you ask them, how strongly do you intend, what are your intentions when it comes to getting vaccinated on a scale from 1 to 10? They tell you, I'm a 5 on that. One of the questions you can ask if you're looking at their intention to vaccinate is, why aren't you a 4? And now all of a sudden you have to engage in a completely different thinking process. It's like, oh, well, okay, how come I am not a 4? Which means I do have some things that I believe about this that make me think that it might be a good idea. And now we talk in that way.
Yeah.
That's called motivational interviewing. It's a persuasive technique out of therapy. If it's a fact-based claim, if you say, like, the earth is flat, I'd say, well, on a scale from 0 to 100, how sure are you of that? What is your level of certainty on that? And a person, whatever they say, once they quantify it, it opens up a whole new domain of questioning where I can say, oh, you're at 80%. Well, was there a time in your life when you weren't? What got you there? Or how come you're not 20%? And now we're talking in a completely different way. We're talking about metacognition now,
Yeah.
which is much more likely to move a person around in that space. And these are things you can do to yourself right now on anything you feel about the world. It also works on political attitudes. Like, do you think Joe Biden is doing a good job as president? Yes. Well, like, on a scale from 1 to 10, how strongly do you feel he's doing a good job as president? I guess I'm a 7. Like, oh, really? Well, why aren't you a 6? What put you at 7? You can do this to yourself on any belief, any value, or any attitude. And this Bayesian way of looking at the world gives you an opportunity to understand that there's a reason why you feel that way, and you could feel differently. And it's all based off of how much experience and evidence you've gathered so far. And it illustrates how much ignorance you probably have on the issue, because if you had more information, it would change the number. And that helps you see that maybe you haven't done enough work in forming your opinions and stuff.
That is mind-blowing. Thank you. That is a very, very helpful tool that I can use in my life to keep from being a binary thinker, and at least add a little bit of cognitive roots I've got to go through before I hit the tribalism thing. I also feel like that's a really good diagnostic tool in talking to other people. Like
That's the best.
my buddy Josh Jennings is going to be on the podcast for a bonus episode this week, and like one of the things we've noticed that we will do is when we're talking to each other, if we're floating some idea out, one of us will say, like, so I have this idea now, I'm shooting from the hip here, I'm not real firm on this, and we're basically signaling to them, I am not emotionally invested in what I'm about to tell you. You are very welcome to slam dunk this and put me on a new course. I could phrase that as like, I 15% think what I'm about to say. I 85% am not sure, right? Whereas if I said, like, I am 100% on this thing, I know if you're 100%, this is like, I need to kind of figure out how I'm going to talk to you about this, because it's probably going to be very emotionally evocative to you. So it's useful on both ends. Well, I
It's
could,
the best.
David, I could keep talking to you for another hour, and hopefully I will when
Yeah, for sure.
your next book comes out. So what is your next book? When does it come out? Is it available for pre-order?
You can pre-order it right now. You can go to all the places they sell books, or to my website, davemcraney.com, where I have a page for it. It's called How Minds Change. It comes out June 21st. It is roughly 6 years of on-the-ground reporting, everything from Westboro Baptist Church to the Flat Earthers to 9/11 truthers to all the scientists who study all these things. And most importantly, I spent a lot of time with groups of people who have developed persuasion techniques based off of actual hardcore science and experience, deep canvassing, motivational interviewing, and street epistemology, which, by the way, street epistemology is in your neck of the woods. There's a lot of people, the main like office is in San Antonio.
Oh, really?
And all those, yeah.
Okay.
And all those techniques are outlined in the book as to how you could use them to have better conversations and be better at changing your own mind. But it covers the gamut. It starts with neurons and works all the way up to big giant social issues and big giant social changes that have taken place, and tries to show you what is behind all of that and how to make it, how to use it to create a better world.
Love it. I can't wait to read it. I can't wait to talk to you about it. And I'm very appreciative of you coming on. So everybody go out and pre-order How Minds Change by David McRaney. And I also very much commend your podcast, You Are Not So Smart.
Thank you so much. This has been a super pleasure. And I look forward to going up there and eating tacos again with you soon.
Yeah, that was fun. Great. Thanks so much, David.
All right, man. Thank you.
That's the show. Thanks for listening. Thank you, media assistant Eric Stipe, who edited today's program. And on that note, Thank you, glorious patrons of the orphanage, who make the whole thing possible. You can join them and support the show by going to patreon.com/Andrew Heaton. Until next time, I've been Andrew Heaton, and so have you.